January 1945. A gray dawn settles over a prisoner of war camp somewhere in the American Midwest. Snow crunches beneath boots. Steam rises in pale columns from a long wooden mess hall. Inside, the air smells of roasted coffee and warm bread. Tin cups clink softly. For the German prisoner standing in line, this is not the soundscape of defeat they imagined. It is something far more disorienting. Only weeks earlier, many of these men had marched under collapsing fronts in the Ardennes, the Rhine, or Alsace. They expected captivity to mean hunger, humiliation, and cold. German military culture had long warned soldiers of brutal treatment by the enemy. Nazi propaganda reinforced the idea that surrender meant degradation, revenge, and starvation. Yet here, on American soil, the first thing many prisoners received was a cup of hot coffee and a slice of fresh bread. To understand why this moment mattered, one must return to the final phase of the war in Europe. By late 1944 and early 1945, Allied forces were capturing German soldiers in unprecedented numbers. After the Battle of the Bulge alone, tens of thousands surrendered. By war's end, the United States held more than 370,000 German prisoners of war in camps across America. These camps were not improvised outposts of punishment. They were governed by the 1929 Geneva Convention, a framework the U.S. military followed with remarkable consistency. The German soldiers expected something else entirely. Many believed captivity would mirror the harsh discipline of their own army, where food was rationed tightly and punishment was swift. Some feared retaliation for Luftwaffe bombings or U-boat attacks. Others assumed they would be worked to exhaustion or deliberately underfed. Instead, they encountered routine, order, and a surplus that bordered on the surreal. Official U.S. Army records show that German POWs received the same caloric intake as American soldiers stationed at home, approximately 3,700 calories per day. This included meat, vegetables, sugar, milk, and bread baked daily in camp kitchens. Coffee, considered essential to American morale, flowed freely. Bread was not black, dense, or rationed, but white, soft, and abundant. For many Germans, this alone shattered expectations. The contrast was profound. In Germany, by 1945, civilian rations had collapsed to subsistence levels. Bread was often stretched with sawdust or potato flour. Coffee had long been replaced by bitter substitutes made from chicory or roasted grains. To taste real coffee again, hot and strong, was to be confronted with the reality of American industrial power and logistical reach. The symbolic object returned again and again, the coffee cup, warm in frozen hands. Diaries and post-war memoirs capture this shock with restraint but clarity. One former Wehrmacht sergeant later wrote that he felt confused rather than relieved upon his first meal in captivity. The confusion came from realizing that the enemy possessed not only military dominance, but material excess. Another prisoner recalled that the bread was so fresh it steamed when broken, a detail repeated in multiple accounts. American camp commanders documented similar observations. Reports note that many German POWs initially suspected deception, believing rations would be reduced after registration. They were not. The consistency itself became transformative. Day after day, meals arrived on schedule. Coffee was replenished. Bread was replaced when stale. This regularity contrasted sharply with the collapsing infrastructure of wartime Germany. This experience began to alter perception. Nazi ideology had portrayed the United States as decadent, weak, and racially degenerate, yet the prisoners saw discipline without brutality, abundance without chaos. They observed guards who followed rules, not whims. In some camps, POWs were paid small wages for labor as required by international law and allowed to purchase items at camp canteens. The system functioned not as a spectacle but as a routine. The transformation was subtle, not dramatic. There were no sudden declarations of ideological conversion. Instead, doubt crept in quietly. How could a society portrayed as corrupt sustain such efficiency? How could an enemy feeding its captives better than Germany fed its civilians be morally bankrupt? These questions lingered, unspoken but persistent. Historians have noted that American POW camps became unintended classrooms. Prisoners had access to newspapers, libraries, and even re-education programs in the later stages of the war. But long before lectures or pamphlets, the lesson was delivered daily in simple form: hot coffee, fresh bread, enough to go around. Material reality undermined propaganda more effectively than argument. The coffee cup became a symbol not just of nourishment, but of predictability. In totalitarian systems under strain, scarcity breeds fear and control. In these camps, abundance coexisted with order. The prisoners were not free, but they were fed, sheltered, and governed by transparent rules. For men raised under a regime of command and punishment, this distinction mattered. By the time repatriation began in late 1945, many former POWs carried these impressions home. Post-war surveys conducted by Allied authorities indicated that a significant number returned with more favorable views of American society than they had held before capture. This did not erase the trauma of war or the weight of defeat, but it planted seeds of comparison. The epilogue of this story does not end at the camp gates. In the years that followed, West Germany rebuilt itself alongside the very nation that had once been its enemy. Former prisoners entered a society forced to confront its past and choose a different path. For some, the memory of captivity in America stood in quiet contrast to the ruins they returned to. In memory, the sound of that first morning lingers: the clink of tin cups, the low hum of a working kitchen, the steam arising from coffee poured without ceremony. It was not kindness meant to impress, nor mercy meant to redeem. It was procedure, policy, and abundance functioning together. Sometimes history turns not on speeches or battles, but on bread that is fresh when broken and coffee that is hot when expected. In that simple consistency, many German prisoners encountered an unsettling truth: power rooted in abundance and rules can outlast power built on fear.